Good afternoon and welcome to Open Door Live. I'm Vince Robinson, and I am very blessed today to have with us as a guest Dr. Runoko Rashidi. Dr. Rashidi is going to be doing a presentation on Zoom this coming weekend, the 29th and the 30th, which you will be able to view. It's called Return to the Nile Valley, and he's going to be presenting photographs of things that he's collected over there in terms of museum visits and some of the other places that he's visited in the land of Kemet. So I would strongly urge you to take advantage of this webinar, this webcast, as it comes this weekend. It will take place at 8 o'clock Friday night, and then it will also resume the next morning at 11 a.m., and that's Eastern Standard Time. So you'll have to adjust your schedule based on where you are. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome to Open Door Live, Dr. Runoko Rashidi.
Hey, good morning, Brother Vince. It's good to be with you again, man.
Good to have you with us, and glad to see the smile on your face. You know, I've been watching the Hoppy film situation, bro, and I have to tell you that I never have seen you as happy as you are when you're having a conversation with Felicia Harden.
Well, it's hard not to be happy when you're talking with Sister Felicia. And in addition to that, I love to share this information. Zoom and StreamYard and WebEx and, Google Meet and all of those things have really been a godsend in many ways, being unable to travel like I'm used to, but also having the access to the ability to share the photographs, not just to interview, but to share the photographs. I love that.
Yeah. I was remembering from your presentation the photographs of you with the audience, particularly in the UK, and how they had just surrounded you and everyone was smiling and they just seemed to be so connected to what was happening. Could you talk about the importance of being able to connect with live audiences on that level?
A long time ago, I did a series of presentations called The Joy of African History. And there is a kind of a joy and just a good feeling about being able to share the great things that we've done. I think that we need, in many ways, a real dose of love and a good dose of knowledge of self. And so you can see that in the faces a lot of times of the people that I interact with when I do my presentations. And it's especially nice to see that in our young people, what I call our young scholars. And so I want to show some photographs from a presentation that I've been working on, which is a virtual tour of the British Museum. I want to emphasize some of the Nile Valley pieces. We don't have to go that long. You can tell me when we want to stop. And all this is a prelude to the webinar that I'm going to do this weekend that I hope the audience will find interesting. And that is a return to the Nile Valley. A lot of us work on the Nile Valley. I've been doing webinars on Africans in Europe, in Asia, in the South Pacific, in Australia. But the Nile Valley is really the cradle of civilization. And it's difficult not to be excited by that. And so let me see if I can share some of the photographs and see if we can, I think I need to go here. Let's start here. Yeah, I believe you can see that. This is Amenhotep III. When you're in the British Museum, and that's where we are now, I want you to imagine that. This museum was founded in 1753. It's full of loot. It's full of our stuff. According to Wikipedia, which is a controversial source, but I use it when I can, when it's valid. There are more than 100,000 Egyptian artifacts just in the British Museum alone, and a lot of them are on display. So the difference between what I'm doing this morning, or this afternoon in your case, and what I'm going to do this weekend is this weekend, I'm going to begin at the beginning. I'm going to begin in the pre-dynastic period and go all the way to the Arab invasions of the Nile Valley and the introduction of Coptic Christianity and Islam to the Nile Valley. Here, I'm just showing some of the key points or some of the major figures of Nile Valley history as a way to promote that webinar. Now, Amenhotep III, who comes to us in the 18th dynasty, comes to us at the height of ancient African power, I think, at least one of the high points. This is the 18th dynasty. This is about 1375 BC. A lot of times we talk about the missing noses on the statues, but you can see here in many cases, and this is one of the best, the statue is completely intact. And this is just a beautiful, beautiful piece. For those who don't know, Amenhotep III is the father of Akhenaten, the father-in-law of Nefertiti, the husband of Queen Tai, and the grandfather of King Tut, Tutankhamun. So we start our museum tour there. Whenever I take a group there, this is where we begin, because this is at the beginning, and a companion statue. And here is the full piece, just beautiful. So this is at the beginning of a corridor, I guess about 150 feet long and about 60 feet wide. And you have African artifacts in the center and on both sides. So let's go through there as if we were actually in the museum itself. You can see in my presentations, including the museum presentations, it's, you know, people like it because you can be right there. You can actually see the artifacts themselves. I try to make them family friendly. I have so much hope for the future of our people, the young people, not necessarily my generation. I think folks of my generation have mostly done what they're going to do. And the generation after us, I think that they've drank a lot of the Kool-Aid as well. But the babies, our grandchildren, the young ones who have not been contaminated with this Urugu virus, I think that they really carry the seeds. Now, right to the right of that is what's called a king list. And this is a list of all the names of the kings that were recognized as legitimate. This is from the 19th dynasty reign of Ramses II. So it would be everybody from the first dynasty through Ramses' father, Seti I. And a dynasty is simply a family of rulers, one member of the family coming after the other for an extended period of time, and there were 30 of them. Here's a detail. And here you can just see the beautiful writing. There are at least 4 writings, ancient scripts in the Nile Valley. You have the Medu Neter or hieroglyphics, you have hieratic, you have Demotic, and you have Meroitic. You have at least 4. So when people say that ancient Africa was a pre-literate or non-literate society, that's just ridiculous. This is one of the most powerful kings of the 12th dynasty. I believe that this is Senuseret III. Look at the big ears. I call these Barack Obama ears. The idea, the larger the ear, the more you could hear. And the more you heard, the more you would know. So these Africans didn't run from knowledge, they ran to it. And I think that that's something that we need to embrace. And you can see the cultural influence. We can go back here, and the cloth that he has over his head is a Nemes cloth, a light piece of cotton cloth used to protect him from the rays of the sun. And then you can see more of it here, but you can also see, at least some people believe, that the wigs that these British judges wear are actually rooted in ancient Nile Valley tradition. This is that same king. I'm not going to show you many. This is Senuseret III again. And then you have another image of that same type of stone, which is polished pink granite, here in the form of a gigantic fist, which was a part of a huge Egyptian temple. It's been said that our ancestors built like men 100 feet tall. And the size of these objects, I think, reflect that. Here is in the center of the museum, on the first floor, the Egyptian collection, a magnificent stone head, also a pink granite, once again of the king Amenhotep III. I mean, like perfection. And I love the expression on his face, the serenity, the sense of calm and control. And then I want to briefly take you, this, by the way, is a fragment of the beard of Heramakit of the Great Sphinx. This was found by an Italian circus strongman in 1817 between the paws of what we call the Great Sphinx. It's right there. It's in a glass case in the British Museum. A beautiful statue of the warrior King Tutmosis III and Sekhmet, the lioness-headed deity. And then I want to take you around the corner and show you a piece from the Assyrian section. The Assyrians were the enemies of the Kemites and Cushites, especially in the 7th century BC. And they invaded Kemet on 2 occasions. They sacked, perhaps more than that, perhaps 3 occasions. They sacked the city of Memphis in the north. And more importantly, a few years later, they attacked and sacked the city of Waset, or Thebes, or Luxor, which was the heart of Kemet. And here you have a series of reliefs from an Assyrian palace in Iraq, and it shows the people that were conquered in what was called the Kingdom of Judea, and what is now Palestine and Israel, and you can see the detail there. These are clearly Black people. And so in our studies, we are not just looking at the Nile Valley itself, but we're also looking at the spread of Nile Valley civilization to the adjoining areas. You have these pieces from the ancient world of Greece and Rome. This is an Ethiopian soldier in the Persian army fighting the Greeks. And then you have all these marvelous pieces. Let's finish by a quick look at some of the rest of the pieces in that main hall in the British Museum. This is the great Pharaoh Thutmose I and the Rosetta Stone. You hear this commercial about the Rosetta Stone, but there actually is a Rosetta Stone. And this was inscribed by the people called the Ptolemies in 196 BC. And this is what was used by Champollion and some of the French scholars and English scholars to translate ancient hieroglyphic texts into modern language. And you got to kind of push your way through to get to this. This is always a crowded part of the museum. It's in a glass case, and you have to almost force your way through there. Kemwasit, who was the son of Ramses the Great, and comes to us about 1290 BC. And he is important to us because, among other things, he is one of the first people, perhaps the first person that we know of that restored the monuments. Remember now that by this time, 1290 BC, the pyramids on the Giza Plateau are more than 1,000 years old. Think about the longevity, the enormity of African civilization. Even at this time, pyramids on the Giza Plateau are more than 1,000 years old. That's very profound. And he sought to restore those. And I have to give shout out to my brother, Tony Browder, who is doing similar work, in my opinion, in the 25th dynasty tombs. I think that the scholars, the African scholars, must support each other and not project themselves as rivals or competitors. African history is big and it's vast, and there's more than enough room for everybody to find an area and stake their claim. If we are talking about Ma'at and Hotep, the community needs to see that we embody those principles and we don't just mouth them. And then this is another pharaoh that you don't hear much about, Ramses IV, making offerings to God. Another beautiful statue of Amenhotep III, and a Libyan pharaoh named Asorkon and his queen Keromama. And this is the Shabaka stone, also called the Shabaka stela. Shabaka was a 25th dynasty king from Kemet, or in Kemet. He is actually from Sudan. He's from Nubia. This is during what's called the Napatan period. And what he did, one of the major contributions of his reign, was to take the ancient creation story called the Memphite theology and have it transcribed on stone. And the greatest figure during this period of time is the Nubian king of Kemet and Kush, called Taharqa. And here we have Taharqa being embraced by a gigantic ram. And as again, I try to make all my presentations family friendly. I'm not about calling people a bunch of names and et cetera, et cetera. I want people to embrace our story. I want them to find joy in it and a kind of a refuge. And so this is towards the end of that main area. And here, I think, is the last piece that I want to show you. There's also a lot of stuff upstairs. In fact, maybe I'll show you one or two pieces from there. But downstairs, this is the last king of the last dynasty of Kemet. There are 30 dynasties, and this is the last ruler, Nectanebo II. And here you can see the nose and the Ujat, the uraeus, have been deliberately chiseled out as if to curse him. This was done by the Persians. And of course, this is the webinar, Return to the Nile Valley, Friday night, January 29th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Saturday morning, the webinars are always, generally anyway, the last Friday and the first Saturday and the last Saturday of the month. So the second part will be Saturday, January 2nd. Let me show just a few images from upstairs. I want to just show one segment. And this is from the tomb of Nebamun and Upuki. And these were artisans who lived during the time of Amenhotep III, who we began with about 1275 BC. And these slabs were actually carved out of the tombs. There's Nebamun himself out hunting with his wife and daughter. And then look at these beautiful pieces. Now, this one I've used a lot because I don't know if there's another piece that shows African people so beautifully in the ancient Nile Valley. Look at the hair, locks, braids, whatever they are, the beautiful skin. So this is our legacy. And the interesting thing about these museums is that they, on the one hand, people say Africans don't have a history, but so much of our history is in these museums. And so that's a kind of a brief synopsis of what I wanted to share this morning and a kind of a preview of the kind of work that I'm going to be doing at the end of the month. And again, I'll be taking a group to Kemet, God willing, on August the 1st. Hopefully the new museum will be open at that time and we will be able to do something I've never been able to do on all my trips to Egypt. I've been there 25 times. The plan this time will be to go in the tomb chamber of Zoser, to go in the tomb chamber of the Step Pyramid, the world's first large stone building and the monument designed by the multi-genius Imhotep. And that's essentially what I wanted to share with you this morning, Brother Vince.
Yeah, that's the pyramid is the one that we visited last year.
Yeah.
It's the one that's got like 4 different levels to it.
I think it actually has 5 or 6 levels. Some of them I think might be submerged in the sand, but I started traveling to Egypt in 1991, and now the tomb chamber is actually open. So instead of just viewing it from the outside, you can actually go in the tomb chamber. This is the first pyramid and the world's first large stone building. And so I find that very, very exciting. And again, the new Egyptian museum should be open. And God knows what that's going to be like, brother, because the old one was impressive. Yeah. But the new one is really going to be stunning. It's open now. Yeah. But you're going to get private tours. Tony Browder told me he was there in December when they were offering private tours of $1,500 per person. Believe that? Wow. $1,500, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's someone that will pay $1,500.
Shows how our history is being exploited.
Yes.
And our cultural heritage is being monetized.
Yeah. Well, you know, and another interesting point that you brought up during the broadcast that you did Thursday was just the volume of our artifacts that are in museums all over the world. And you kind of have to wonder, you know, if all of those things were in their rightful places, you know, what attraction there would be for the continent for people to come to Africa to see those things as opposed to going to London or, you know, St. Louis or wherever these other museums are.
But who runs Egypt right now? And is it an African government? That question comes up a lot. You know, I post a lot of things on Facebook. And when I post these artifacts, 2 things come out. People talk about the noses, and they have all their theories. And the other thing is people say they need to be returned. But if they were returned to Egypt, who would benefit from that? Would African people actually benefit from that? Because I see the government of Egypt, well, anyway, I don't know if that's a controversy that we want, a rabbit hole we want to go down.
Yeah.
But I think that you get my point.
Yes.
Then people will say, they took them from us. But we rarely say, how do we let them take them from us?
Right.
So there's a lot of things we can talk about that spring from knowledge of self and even these museum tours and collections.
Could you talk about how the complexions changed over a period of time based on the invasions of Assyrians, Hyksos, and so forth and so on? And the reason that I bring that up is because, you know, a few weeks back, I was exploring Dr. Chancellor Williams' book, The Destruction of Black Civilization. And one of the things that comes up in that conversation is the fact that there was an integrationist movement, it seemed, in Kemet at some point. But then you had the people in Nubia who were saying, you know, we just want to be who we are and we don't really want to welcome folks from other places. Could you talk about that for a few?
The whole region in North Africa and also the Middle East was one time dominated by Black people. You have the great civilization called Sumer. A lot of people now are talking about the Sumerians. This was in Iraq. You have the Indus Valley civilization in what is now Pakistan. Those were all Black civilizations, and they were overrun. And Egypt was overrun too by the people called the Hyksos. I think the reason that Egypt survived as long as it did is because it's difficult to get in there. You either have to come from the south, or you come from the Mediterranean in the north, and then there's another passage that leads to the Red Sea. So it was difficult. Egypt, in a sense, was saved by its degree, or Nile Valley civilization was saved by its degree of isolation, because the only way you would have gotten there in ancient times is to cross the desert. And so over a period of time with invasions, the African people, the ancient indigenous people of the Nile Valley, were pushed further and further south. And so if you go in the Nile Valley, and you can start with Alexandria, the further south you go, the darker, the more African people, the more African looking the people are going to be. One of the reasons that I think that's one of the reasons that so many African American tourists really love Aswan and even Luxor is because the people are more African looking there. Whereas if you go to Alexandria and even in Cairo, that's a relative rarity. And so just remember that things change all the time. The Nile Valley has been invaded many times. And we could even say that that invasion is going on now, not necessarily in the Nile Valley per se, but by the Chinese in Africa. So history never stops, and the past is not dead.
Yes. I welcome you to an opportunity to talk about some of the other things that you have. I know you have been involved in at least 22 books, probably more than that right now. So could you talk about some of the other things that you have to offer to give people a perspective on the history of Africans around the planet?
Yeah, I've written or edited 22 books. I'm supposed to be working on another one right now, making slow progress and revising my book on the African presence in early Europe. From the time I was in my late teens, I developed an interest in what happened to those Africans who left Africa way back in the day. I was fortunate when I was young to read Destruction of Black Civilization. And it became very clear to me early on that our history didn't start with slavery. And I knew that in ancient times, before shackles and chains were placed on our hands and our feet, that African people of their own volition went into Asia, went into Europe. Some of those ancient Africans went as far as Australia and the Pacific Islands in the Americas. And so a lot of my work focuses on that. I've written or edited 6 books on the African presence in Asia. I've talked about my work on the African presence in early Europe. I've got 2 books that are just photo books that look at the African presence before slavery. If you want my work on, I have a book called the Ivan Van Sertima Papers, which is a tribute to Ivan Van Sertima, but also it contains most of my writings on the ancient Nile Valley. And so I pride myself on not just being a YouTube scholar or a Wikipedia scholar, but I've done a lot of primary research. And now that the pandemic is here and perhaps I'm slowing down in my travels, it gives me an opportunity to dissect that information and through vehicles like what we're doing today to share it with the world. If you're really interested in my books, if you want to order one, if you want to get information about the tour, the webinars, et cetera, if you want to make a donation, I encourage you to go to my website, which is drrunoko.com. You're posting it at the bottom, and we can continue our interaction.
Okay. I also just wanted to ask you, you speak of your daughter every once in a while. How is she doing?
My daughter is growing up, brother. She's a teenager now, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but for the most part, she seems to be a typical teenager, you know, and just learning who she is and what her contribution to the world is going to be. It's been very, very frustrating because of the travel because of the travel bans and the pandemic, because she lives in France, not being able to see her as much as I would have liked. I pride myself on being a very, very good historian, but I would also like for her to see me as a very good father. I want my daughter to be able to say, my daddy was one of the greatest historians who ever lived, but he always made time for me, that I was a priority for him. And so she's doing good, brother, and I appreciate you asking about her.
Yeah, so I'm glad to hear that. And, you know, when I think of her, I think of Tony Browder and his daughter, Atlantis, and the wonderful work that she's done. I just think it's a phenomenal thing that she's following in the footsteps of her father. You know, she had the privilege of being the first to enter one of the tombs that he's doing the excavations on. And since we're talking about that, could you discuss the importance of the work that Brother Tony is doing there in Kemet?
What Tony is doing is historic. And Tony, I call him Karak because he's been excavating the tomb of a man named Karakamun, who lived at the intersection between the 25th and 26th dynasties. Remember, a dynasty is a family of rulers, one member of the family coming after the other for an extended period of time. And there were 30 dynasties. So Tony's work is largely in the 25th and 26th dynasties, a period, let's say, from 700 BC to about 600 BC. And what he's doing is historic, and that he's actually financing and helping to lead the excavation. See, a lot of us be doing a lot of talking, you know, but this brother's actually put his time, you know, his fortune into doing something that the ancestors have got to be proud of and will leave a mark for future generations. Not everybody can do everything. You know, I've been to 125 countries. I photographed literally every significant Nile Valley collection in museums in the world. Look at what Tony Browder is doing. Everybody can't do that, but everybody can do something. I think that a lot of times what we have is a kind of a savior mentality, a messiah complex, as though we expect people to do for us, to make the sacrifices, and to even think for us, and to tell us what to do and what to think. So we want to encourage people to engage in critical thinking and remember that you can make a difference. You can have an impact. And if you can't do these things yourself, make a contribution. Buy the books. Support Vince Robinson and the work that he's trying to do. Support the scholars. Let us see the big picture. This is what I want to say, and maybe this is the most important thing. If Black folk don't agree on anything, there's one thing that most of us, all of us would agree on, and that is Black people need to unite. Black people need to come together. But we rarely talk about the basis of that unity. And to me, knowledge of self, which gives us a sense of pride, can be that unifying factor. I think that all of us want to feel good about ourselves. We want to feel like we come from something bigger than ourselves that enables us to lift our heads a little higher and stand a little taller. I think that that is something that goes beyond color, whether you're light or you're dark, whether you're Muslim or Hebrew or a Rastafarian or Christian or Jew, whether you're a male or female, I think that all of us want to come from something bigger than ourselves. And you know what David Whitaker says, and I repeat it all the time, and that is, what you do for yourself depends on what you think of yourself. And what you think of yourself depends on what you know of yourself. And what you know of yourself depends on what you have been told. And we must practice the principles of Ma'at. Here we are talking about digging up the past. We can't just be for the pleasure in doing it. And it just can't be to have an accumulation of knowledge. We must implement that. So when we say the laws of Ma'at are about truth, justice, righteousness, balance, harmony, reciprocity, we must embody that in what we do and how we interact with each other. Otherwise, to me, it really has no meaning.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because when you say Ma'at, I would venture to say that a majority of us don't even know what that means. And I think what you just said speaks to the importance of us going back in history to discover those things, to learn those things as a means of knowing who we are. I also know that you have an affinity to Marcus Garvey, who had probably the most influential and successful movement of organizing Black people in recent history. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that we can learn or glean from what Marcus Garvey was about then that could help us moving things forward now.
I think that we can learn from Marcus Garvey's successes and also Marcus Garvey's failures. I think that we have to be able to see the big picture. You know, one of our great scholars who we don't talk about as much as I think we should is a man named Dr. Jacob Carruthers. And Dr. Carruthers was based in Chicago, called himself Baba Jake, good man, and obviously brilliant when it comes to Nile Valley civilization. He told me not long before he passed, he says, Runoko, the biggest problem that we have in our community is not white supremacy. He says it's our ego, that all of us want the recognition, that all of us want to be the boss, all of us want to be the man, the one in front of the microphone. I admire a lot of people who don't need to be in front of a microphone, who just want to do the work. And I would encourage all of us to be able to see the big picture and see that your success is my success, that is bigger than you and me as individuals. And I think that these are the lessons that our ancestors left. Building strong families, seeing again that it's bigger than me or you. One of the, I think, worst things that we do, and I tell my students this for whatever it's worth, I think if you really want to understand history, you have to be able to immerse yourself in the culture of the people that you're studying. What do I mean by that? I think that there's a tendency to assume that other people in different times and places saw the world like we do today in terms of race and class and gender, etc. We take our values and impose it on other civilizations and assume that they saw the world like we do. In other words, we are not seeing what they were, we're seeing what we are. And we are imposing that vision on ancient people. To me, that's not serious scholarship. There's also a tendency to cherry pick. Cherry picking is when you take bits and pieces of information here and there and ignore the rest that doesn't agree with your position, and you say, this is what happened. A serious scholar will take the totality of the information and the data and then draw conclusions from it. So as I get older, I'm an elder now. I try to apply and share the lessons that I've learned and the hard knocks that I've encountered growing up and getting to be where I am. And it's very, very important, as the ASCAC organization talks about, to engage in intergenerational transmissions of wisdom, to be able to take the information that we have and pass it down. Now, we mentioned Brother Kofi in the other show. And one of the things that's great about Kofi, he's a younger brother, and he's very, very humble in his own way. And he's just a good person. And I think he's taken all the information that I've accumulated, which is part of the information that I've been certain and Asa Hilliard accumulated, and applying it and adapting it. And he will in turn, and I'm just using him as an example, he will in turn take that information and pass it down to the next generation. Don't be afraid of spreading knowledge, of spreading wisdom. There's I think an Asante proverb that goes, wisdom is not like gold dust to be tied up in a sack and hidden away. We must share, and we must want our students and our offspring, our sons and daughters, to go beyond us. Don't be jealous. Don't be afraid of the information. Give it freely, because it's about liberating the minds of our people.
Well, brother, I have to give you credit for being about what you talk about. It's obvious and evident in the work that you've done that you've been able to shed a lot of light, a lot of knowledge, and give people a better understanding of the presence of African people around the globe. I just want to take one more opportunity to plug what you're going to be doing next weekend, 29th, which is next Friday, and the 30th, which is Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday morning. You can go to eventbrite.com and put Runoko in the search window, and it will take you to that event, and you'll be able to purchase your tickets. It's $25, and that covers both. Also, just wanted to let folks know about the tour that you're doing. It will go to Kemet on August 1st, and that's going to be a 2-week tour. And if you want more information about that, you can go to drrunoko.com and you can register to participate in that tour. It has been a pleasure to have you on this morning. I really appreciate your willingness to share your time with us, and as always, to increase our knowledge. I learn something every time. And, you know, now I'm a fan of Taharka, man. Taharka, 25th Dynasty, you got me locked in. I learned about Ramses II, Ramses the Great, and I saw that magnificent sculpture in that museum that they have over there. But the more and more I tune in, and the more I see these stories over and over again, and I hear what you are sharing with us, I'm growing in my knowledge of the civilization of Kemet, and I think it's rewarding for me, and I'm sure it can be rewarding for others. The importance of the webcast that you're doing this coming weekend is that you can watch this and learn things that you need to know before you go. You know, I can't say that enough. It will mean so much more to you when you have an understanding of the people and the monuments and the things that you're looking at and where they are. It will all come together, and it's a fantastic experience, brother. I'm remembering that hot air balloon ride. I'm remembering riding in a horse-drawn carriage to get to certain places in Luxor and Aswan, and I'm holding the camera, and the sister's sitting next to me, and she's actually driving the buggy. That was something that I'll never forget. And here's my plea. Of all those pictures that you have of Baba Runoko in your presentations, we got to put at least one Vince Robinson photograph of Baba Runoko in your presentation.
I'm going to do that, brother. You have one picture in particular that we took on our last day in Sudan, and we did the libation that day. And I'm going to use that photograph in my upcoming webinar. You're a brilliant photographer, my brother, and the work that you're doing is wonderful. So I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show, to help promote the event, to build with you again. All I can say is thank you, Brother Vince, and keep on doing what you're doing. I salute you in the name of many, many African people.
Thank you, brother. I'll make sure that you get that photograph, and I will just encourage you to continue to do what you do, because we are all better as a result of what you do. Peace and blessings.
Stay strong, my brother. Happy New Year.
All right. We'll see you this weekend.